House District 17, the race you've all been sticking around to listen to. We have Republican Ross Fitzgerald and Democrat Barnett Sporkin-Morrison. The winner will take office in January for a 2-year term in the state legislature representing House District 17, which includes Pondere County, Teton County, and a little bit of Lewis and Clark County. So Ross resides with his wife Gretchen on a family farm outside of Fairfield, and he is a 1967 Power High School graduate, a Power Pirate. He earned a bachelor's degree in ag production from Montana State University. He's a business broker, an intermediary, and a real estate agent now. In the past, he has done a lot of different things. He's worked as a farmer, a commodities merchandiser, a fire training instructor, a livestock fieldman, and he was the farm news director and worked in advertising sales for the KEIN radio station. Ross served in the Montana Air National Guard, and his civic involvement includes 30 years with the Power Volunteer Fire Department, 20 years on the MSU Fire Services Training School Advisory Council, the Fairfield Lions Club, the Dutton American Legion Post, where he serves as finance officer. He's a past member of the Skyline Lodge Board here in Choteau, and used to be a member of the Montana Grain Growers Association Board, and he's a past president of that as well. Ross volunteers at local fundraisers as an auctioneer and a spotter. Barnett lives in Choteau with his wife, veterinarian Kristen Boroff, and their 2 young children. As a child, he lived in Valier, but his family moved to Wyoming, where he graduated from Meeteetse High School. He attended the University of Wyoming and graduated in 2005 with a bachelor's degree in ag business and a minor in international studies. He then entered a graduate program which included service abroad at the U.S. Embassy in Stockholm, Sweden. He graduated in 2006 with a master's degree in agricultural economics and then worked as an agricultural economist for the USDA's FFAS office in Washington, D.C. He next applied for lateral entry into the U.S. Foreign Service and was posted as a regional diplomat to the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala City, covering Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, and Honduras. He later served as an agricultural attaché with senior commercial officer duties there. After being there for several years, he and his wife decided to return to America, and Kristen took a job with Double Arrow Veterinary Clinic here in Choteau, where we love her. Barnett is the sole proprietor of a small coffee import company, and he also works as the chief economist for Ag Fertilizers, Inc. out of Vaughan, and he is currently the chairman of the Teton County Democrats. Will you please tell us why you are running for office?
Last fall, I began to grow greatly concerned about the direction that the political rhetoric was going in our country. When we had presidential candidates that sounded more like George Wallace, Strom Thurmond, rather than FDR or Reagan, I grew deeply concerned. And in a pretty much one-sided conversation with my young son, Adlai John, in about August of last year, I promised him that his father would do everything that he could to protect his freedom and the freedom that all us as Americans hold dear. When I made my decision to run for the Montana State Legislature, it was to honor the promise that I made to my son, who is now 2.5 years of age. And over the course of the past 6 weeks, getting to know our little daughter, Esther Pearl, and I look into her eyes, I have even more resolve today than I did then, to make sure that I can protect our freedoms and protect everything that matters for freedom, family, and community, not only for ourselves today, but also our posterity and for our fellow citizens in this country.
I've been involved all over the county, the region, and the state for a number of years, and it came to a point where it was time. There was an opening and an opportunity for me, and it's something I've been involved in and interested in since 1980 when I was a lobbyist for the volunteer firefighters in Helena. My experience and solid approach with the issues over time here in different communities has given me quite a broad range of experience, and I've learned you take the emotion out of the issue and try to provide solutions. I'm familiar with Helena and all its intricacies and anomalies, and over the past years since the term limits come in, things are in somewhat what's the word I could use politely? they are somewhat disturbed, if nothing else. It takes relationships and coalitions to make things happen and make things change for the better. So in that sense of things, I think I've gained that ability to be able to put those coalitions together, provide solutions, and work for the folks here in the three-county area.
How will your life experiences affect your ability to be a state legislator?
Well, many of my life experiences are non-recordable. But in the sense of the positive things that I've done through business and through being involved with associations such as the Grain Growers and many other organizations, you learn again how to solve problems, all the way to even to Washington, D.C., where I was a lobbyist and a purveyor for the Montana Barley and Montana Wheat Growers. So it gave me a lot of insight as to how to deal with folks in the political world. And it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. But over time and trust, providing credibility and information, you can resolve those issues and problems, small or large. So over the past 40 years being a resident, or 60 years being a resident of Teton County, I've seen it grow. I've seen ups and downs. So life experiences are what they are, and if you make a positive, it all works out in the end. But dealing with people without getting all emotional and being respectful, those are the life experiences I hope to use down in Helena.
I know sometimes when I talk to people about the fact that I'm running for public office, they comment that the fact that I am 33 years of age, what might I actually know? As you know from the description of me, though, I have a master's in science of agriculture economics. I understand from the ground up the economic system of this state and this country. And I have a deep sense of fear in my heart of what's going to happen over the next several years here in the Golden Triangle, as we've seen agricultural returns diminish by almost 50%, and it's probably not going to get better anytime soon. We're seeing a drastic change across the state of Montana of how much revenue is going to citizens, and we're seeing decreases in tax revenue. I'm the only candidate that has an advanced degree in economics and understand that quite a bit. By the time I was 30, I'd actually dined with presidents of foreign countries. I've worked with international ministers of different countries and advised them and helped them to figure out how you take a population of 50% of children that suffer from chronic malnutrition and actually resolve that over a period of years, so you actually have a population that is healthy and is able to actually compete in an international marketplace. I bring a lot of experience of being out in the world, but I grew up in a rural area. I was born and raised down in Park County, Wyoming. My family moved down there from Lear. My older brother was born in Cupbank. So you see in front of yourself somebody that's a product of a rural area, even more rural than this, and actually even more conservative than this, that went out and saw the world, has advised members of the President's Cabinet, has advised international leaders, and actually has a great experience through the international trade negotiations I was involved with, as well as working as a diplomat and the ability to build coalitions. I was able to unite from the poorest to the richest in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras to advocate for advanced agricultural technologies to actually renew agricultural production throughout Central America. And it's something that I would love to do, is to build more coalitions in the state so that we can see advanced economic development for everybody.
So some are advocating transferring at least the management of federal public lands from the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM, for example, to the state of Montana. Do you support or oppose this? And please explain your position.
I am a steadfast supporter of keeping our public lands in the public hands, whether they're federal or state lands, because the reality is, as much as people try to say they're owned by the government, they're not. They're owned by each and every one of us. They're simply held in trust by our democratically elected government. Now, we can argue sometimes that we should transfer management or even ownership from the federal government down to the states, but there's no guarantee that that's actually going to stay in the public's hands. I am a steadfast supporter, however, also, and I will do anything that I can while in the state legislature to make sure that the views of local citizens that live next to the public lands are taken in as much or more consideration than the environmental lobby. The environmental lobby for years have filed lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, while local citizens do not have the financial capacity or the ability to do that to make sure that their viewpoints are heard. A lot of the things that are suggesting that we need to transfer management is because of those issues of whether or not our opinions are heard. And I also think that we have to take a moment to look at the benefits of keeping our public lands in the federal government control or the state government control. Any rancher in here that grazes on a public lease allotment greatly benefits from the Taylor Grazing Act. When we start changing everything, the chances are that we're going to see a change in every way that we can access those public lands, whether it's cattle being able to graze on them, whether it's myself and my family being able to go backpacking and camping, or any of us being able to go hunting and actually to enjoy our public lands. So I will always defend to keep them in the public's hands. I will always advocate so that local communities can be better heard in the management, but I don't think we need to start shifting ownership and shifting management wholesale any time in the near future.
In my view, public land transfer is probably not going to happen in our lifetime, whether you want it to or not, from the Fed to the state. But I would suggest this. I do not believe that the federal government does a great job on managing their lands. I think the state does a lot better job. Here's my thought. There's a patchwork of lands and parcels all over Montana. Back when they gave every other section to the railroad, back to when the state took over certain lands and the feds had the forest and the BLM. And when you integrate the arguments of access to public lands, I have no problem with that. My thought is, why is it such a big problem trying to glue some of these patchwork quilt parcels so that there is access to the public for hunting and recreation, rather than getting a bureaucratic mess created by the virtue of trying to transfer and or sell and or trade to glue more of those parcels together for access. So I'm not sure the state is prepared to en masse take over the feds. I mean, that's a little bit idealistic and not realistic. But I do think there's time to throw the egos and turf issues aside and try to deal with not only the private landowners that are intermingled with some of these access issues, but to work so that you have that mass that benefits both the private grazer or the private landowner, whatever, to be able to take out these arguments and these fence lines and these crossing bills that you see from the last legislature. So from that standpoint, I think there's other solutions to take a look at. The one thing I am concerned with is the rather subtle transfer of land from private associations by up, including the DNRC and others that are putting that around, through budgets. And I don't believe in putting any more land in the public.
The state's rainy day fund, which a year ago was at about $360 million, is projected to shrink to about $109 million by the summer of 2017. What level do you think the rainy day fund should be sustained at, and what would you do to make sure that that fund stays healthy?
Well, I'm not sure where that rainy day term came from. I mean, it's unspent funds that are collected from you folks. And the projections over the last administration or two have been pretty optimistic. And the last time I talked to the legislative fiscal analyst here a month or so ago, it's down to like 69 million and slipping. So I don't know how I necessarily trust projections at this point, because they're pretty dynamic since the natural resource income has gone down, our commodity prices have gone down. So I'm not sure where those numbers can be valid at this point. As far as a rainy day fund, as they call it, I certainly think you need to have some in the reserves or in the unspent income category to take care of emergencies and the low ebb that we have in our economy right now. What that level is, I can't tell you, because I haven't looked at the budget that closely as to what our projected needs are. But obviously, it would be nice to be able to shrink Helen a little bit and leave a little more money in your pockets.
There's been quite a bit of conjecture, if you follow the news, as Melly's talked about, that we've seen that shrink, that rainy day fund, but really, as Ross said, it's the money that's left over at the end of the year. If we look at going back from 2005 up till now, we've usually had about 9.9%, a little bit above that, in comparison to the allocations that were made on the general fund that were supposed to be allocated. The biggest concern right now is if you go back a year, we were projected to see about $314 million left over, and that number has dropped anywhere from numbers from 109 up to 163 up to $188 million. One of the realities that are there is we always have to make sure we have money left over. But when we look at the reason why that's decreasing, there's a lot of political rhetoric right now talking about it because of coal, natural gas, and oil. But the reality is our general fund of the state, 63% of that comes from individual taxes. 11% of that comes from property taxes. When you get down to actually how much comes from natural gas and oil, 3%. Coal, even less than that. So everything that we hear on the radio and the news and people politically out there saying that this is the governor that's decreasing because he's taking action against coal strip and other things, the reality is we've seen this decrease because the revenue that we have as wages has actually decreased. The stock market is bad, so actually some of the money that comes in usually that would be taxed on, agriculture is on a downward trend, and so we're going to see decreased taxes on that income side. We have to make sure that we have money at the end of the year so that we have always an insurance policy. I'm an economist, and I'm pretty frugal at home. My wife and I live in a 780 square foot house, and we could afford a much larger house. But the reality is that we always prefer to have more money in the bank, so if something happens, we will have the capacity to still live in our house and caretake for our family. I do not believe that we need to go and start slashing and slashing and slashing taxes because we have excess money.
In Montana, enrollment in the expanded Medicaid program in July was at 47,399 people, out of a possible estimated 59,000 eligible people. As a member of the 2017 legislature, what, if any, steps do you think need to be taken to make sure that this program remains fiscally viable and available to those who are eligible?
When we look at the mandates we now have for Medicaid expansion, they're similar to things that we have for infrastructure. And that's one of the concerns when we're looking at the state budget. We can talk about how much money is left at the end of the year for the general fund, but these other things usually aren't calculated in the general fund. And so we're going to have to make sure that we have enough tax revenue if we want to continue that Medicaid expansion, but we're also going to have to make sure we have enough tax revenue if we want to make sure that we take care of roads, because that special fund is usually running short $16 million a year. And so specifically on Medicaid expansion, I do believe that when we look at the preamble to the United States Constitution, if you look at the Declaration of Independence, that people have the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. If the most poor and impoverished citizens in this state, or people that are somewhere in between super poor and somewhat poor, somehow get dropped from a program and can't have medical insurance, I think that that's not correct, and I applaud the state legislature last session of making the choice to carry out Medicaid expansion. To be able to pay for these things, though, I think we're going to have to re-look at our tax revenue, and I'm not suggesting any way of increasing taxes on people or corporations, but there are loopholes in our tax system. For instance, for the first 16 months of an oil or natural gas well drilled in the state, the companies barely pay any taxes. You go to Wyoming and North Dakota, it's not that way. We're leaving tax money on the table that other industries should be paying for instead of continuously trying to hit our citizens to pay for these things. And to give you an idea of how hard citizens are getting hit, Montana is only one of 5 states that have an income tax in this country. And this is kind of disgusting to even talk about. One of 5 states that has an income tax in this country that taxes people below the poverty line. If you're a single person in the state that makes $4,560, you're going to get taxed. If you make $11,100 as a single parent with 2 kids, you're going to get taxed by the state on your income. If you're married with 2 kids, with $13,480 a year, you will be taxed. We need to rethink this.
It's my impression that what the Medicaid expansion did was somewhat beneficial to a number of folks in the low-income level, and I'm certainly not arguing helping folks out when they need it. But it also looks to me, as we talk about the other side, where Obamacare is failing miserably, and it's to me, it looks like it's a preamble to single payer, and I even hear one of our candidates on the state level looking at single payer systems. So I'm not sure that this whole thing is going to really survive as it's designed now. And the tab on it right now is pretty high, and I see that it's going to be going higher with more of a state involvement wherever those taxes come from or wherever those priorities are. And from that sense of things, I think the numbers that enroll in that are even going to be greater. So my fear is, and I'm not the expert in healthcare programs and design of actuarials and premiums, but the trend level is really stiffly looking up in terms of costs and higher deductibles. So with that in mind, I guess I'd be fairly skeptical as to how we're going to be able to maintain this program based on the lack of money in the federal system and the downward trend in the Obamacare.
Montana Hospital Association is very much in favor of Montana's Medicaid expansion for hospitals like Teton Medical Center, communities like this, because without Medicaid expansion, we know that they could not survive. So if you are not supportive of Medicaid expansion, how do you propose a hospital the size of Teton Medical Center, although they're not part of benefits? How would you approach keeping a hospital the size of ours viable?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I have the specific answer for that. All I know is that it's going to come to some point, and I'm all for and have supported the rural hospital systems in the small towns. I mean, we're all under a crisis situation as far as keeping our heads above water. But I'm not sure that over time that this, when you've got a federal cooperative funding, that's going to stay viable. And I guess I'm looking for new ways to do that so our rural hospitals do not fold up if they're that dependent on Medicare or Medicaid expansion.
As I mentioned, I do support Medicaid expansion. I can continue to support to make sure that we have the funding to make sure that it continues in its track. You know, when we talk about rural hospitals such as here, it's a great benefit to that, but there's another issue I want to bring up, which is rural mental health. The regional centers in Montana are struggling right now financially. They're struggling to find people to work for them, but one of the things that you can see with the Medicaid expansion, there was actually a significant increase in people that live around the poverty line that have mental health disorders and need help that actually have been coming in and getting help. As an economist and a sociologist, when I look at these things, it's not only just about keeping a rural health center open, it's not only about making sure that a low-income citizen has a right to access medical care, either behavioral care, mental health, or personal care, but we don't recognize that when we caretake and make sure these people have access to it, it has multitudes of economic benefits to us. When an individual has access to health care, when they can make sure that their children have access to health care, if they have a mental disorder, they can access health care, then they're going to be a better worker, they're going to be a better parent, they're going to make sure that their kids are going to school and they're focused on that, and it's one less thing they're to worry about. So we can parse words, we can talk about cutting taxes, defending our rights, and blaming the federal government and Obama for everything that's coming down, but I think we know in rural America and in rural Montana that we need to do something to help our neighbor, and I think that I will always continue to support in continuing with funding Medicaid expansion.
If you get to Helena, what committees would you try to serve on that would best serve this area?
You know, honestly, if I get elected on November 8th, then I'm going to go around to communities and hold even more community meetings and try to talk to people about what they want me to focus on. So if it's specifically on agriculture, then of course you want to be on a committee related to that. If we need to have it something that's going to govern over the Department of Commerce in Montana, which is really the lead on economic development, then I'll be happy to get involved in that. If the citizens tell me that we need to put rural health conditions first, then I'll make sure I'm on the applicable committees. And that's one of the things is that you'll find with me is I want to know what you want. The role of a legislator is not just to stand up in front of a crowd and say, hey, look at me, I'm important. This is what I think now you should vote for me. I'm going to go to hell and I'm never going to talk to you. If you choose to elect me, you will find that I will be extremely annoying because I'm going to be asking people what it is you think, what it is you want me to do, and how it is that I can be the best representative of every citizen in the House District, from north of the interstate at Wolf Creek all the way to Valier, to Poyer to Brady, and everywhere within Teton County. So I will always be open to any suggestions on the activities that people want me to focus on while I'm in the state legislature.
I've done a little quizzing around the county just to find out generally what people are interested in, and it's probably going to narrow down to what the number of people on each committee. But obviously there will be some interest in ag. Telecommunications in the rural area is a big deal. Business and labor has a lot to do with how we operate our businesses. One of the bigger ones up here is Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. Local government, where they change the rules on everybody, and the one I'd like to get on, from the appropriation side, which may not be possible, is long-range planning. So it helps our rural communities out more than maybe government agencies.
Yeah, the first question I believe you answered, both of you answered, and this question's for Barnett, was why you decided to run for office, is that correct? And you mentioned something about freedom being compromised, and I believe you mentioned something about rhetoric. Can you explain that just a little bit more?
It's probably, if you can read my hat that I have on my head, you can see it's actually made in America. It was stitched here, and the words were put on it here in Choteau. It says, "America is great." I'm sorry, but I'm an American exceptionalist. I've seen countries in this world, and I can tell you this is the best damn country on the face of the globe, no matter what anybody says. And I am eternally thankful that since my very first life breath, I was entered into the greatest social contract that has ever been conceived in the history of humankind and may well ever be conceived. I have a great amount of fear in my heart when people suggest this country is not great, that we should evoke that we need to turn it back to the 50s or the 60s when blacks were in the back of the bus, when Jewish people, blacks or Hispanics or gays, were not allowed to be in certain numbers in certain companies or even in government service. And I feel that all the rhetoric that's going on in this country is going against the very freedoms that we hold dear here in rural Montana. And so my decision to run, when I talk about protecting freedom, is to protect freedom for myself and my posterity, to advance the rights of freedom, which was foreseen within our Constitution as well as our Declaration of Independence. And I make that decision based upon the fact that I am an extremely patriotic individual. I love this country with all my heart, and I love this state. And I want to make sure everything that I can do to make sure that our rights are not only kept, that we don't die with the same level of rights that we were born with, that we die with more rights than we ever dreamed.
Ross, that question was directed at Barnett, but if you'd like to weigh in on that in any way, you're welcome to.
I would comment it this way. As I went through my time doing different jobs and positions, I found that two of the biggest problems we see in groups and legislatures and all the way to DC is turf and egos. And that creates a lot of rhetoric because you're either protecting your turf or you're seeking power. And as you look at even the debates, no matter which side you're on, it almost gives you the impression, whether you call it rhetoric or you call it ego and turf, that needs to be eliminated with some good solid communication, some common sense approaches, and respect. And I don't know that that's there yet. That would be something that might eliminate a lot of this baloney. I guess I'll call it that politely.
We're going to go ahead and go to our conclusions, during which you may indicate why people should vote for you.
I've got a little checklist of things that come to my mind. Since I was a firefighter and a fire chief for a good many years, involved in the politics of that, one of the things I'm going to be working on is the volunteer firefighter workman's comp coverage. The other thing which was mentioned earlier is trying to find solutions for rural hospitals, which leads into school funding. I need to analyze and look, and I'm not an economist, but I need to find out why so much money stays in Helena instead of coming to the delivery of education through our rural and city schools. Why that bureaucracy seems to hold on to so much money. I talked to a superintendent or two, and these mandates, both on the federal and state level, are pretty tough to accommodate between schools, and there's a lot of cooperative efforts to help our kids in some of these mandates. Water rights, property rights, the erosion of the same, and the confusion around that. That's another one of my things to understand better. Mental illness, and I'm glad Barnett brought that up. That's come and hit me pretty close over the last few years. And as one sheriff said, we need to get ahead of mental illness and crimes, and not related, but education and being proactive in that is a big deal. Infrastructure obviously is going to come to the top of the legislature because it's been put aside too many sessions, and even in our own county levies, we've got to keep after that so that things don't fall apart. Tort reform is another one that irritates the heck out of me because it isn't there. Automatic reciprocity would be my ideal goal in that particular category. So from those, hopefully building coalitions, relationships, and trust, those are the kind of little working list I have right now. But certainly would like to thank Melody and Jeff and the Acantha and all you folks that turned out here tonight to listen to us, and hopefully we could talk afterwards. But be advised that the four attributes and principles I work off of in this order is faith, family, freedom, and friends. Those four things kind of guide my life. So again, I appreciate you guys being here. Thanks.
I wanted to begin by thanking all of you for coming here tonight, especially the students from Choteau High School. I would encourage all of you to continue to be engaged in the future in the democratic process. Thomas Jefferson and others warned us at our very beginning of our country that if we don't exercise our freedoms, we never realize when we lose them. So thank you all for coming here tonight. I also want to thank the Choteau Acantha for putting on this forum, and I want to, it's really this, and I said this in the last event, I'll say this again, we need to be thankful for what we have. There are billions of people across this earth that live in tyranny, that don't have the right to participate in the democratic events that we have here. I lived in a country for 3 years as a diplomat where this, in as quiet as this is and calm as this is, would never occur. And so I'm eternally thankful that I have the opportunity to participate in this with all of you. When we look forward to whether or not you vote for me on your absentee ballot or going to the poll on November 8th, I just want you to take the opportunity to think about some of the things I said, but also to visit my website. And that's something I want to emphasize. I put up a website. I'm the only candidate up here that is free to put out information about what he does believe, has gone on the record in videos as well as in written word what it is I believe. And I've put in all my communication saying, please tell me what it is you think, because I think that we need to have a conversation. I have statements on there about gun control. I have statements on there about public lands. I have statements on there what we need to do on economic development. I have statements on there about tax policy as well. So if you go to barnett4house.com, that's B-A-R-N-E-T-T 4house.com, or pick up one of my pamphlets over there, I'll give you an easy link to it. You can learn about some of the ways that I view things, but I'm very interested in any responses you guys have about the way that you guys view things as well. You know, we have to recognize that over the coming month, we all have to make personal decisions from the bottom of the ballot to the very top. And the only thing that I ask of all of you as my fellow citizens is that all of us, when we put that pen to paper, that we put the best interests of our nation, our state, and our home communities, and our family and our homes, that we think about all that when we make our voting decision. And I'll tell you, if you elect me as a representative, I will always be working not in my own personal interests. I'll always be working for all the citizens within this House district. I will always be interested in the opinions that you have. And I hope that as we leave here tonight, we remember that leaving political partisanship and differences aside, we're all Americans. And we can, if we choose to have better conversations with each other, we'll make this country better than it already is and make sure that it continues to be great. And we also have to remember tonight, I just say that as you go home tonight, say a prayer for all the individuals in Florida, probably hundreds of thousands that are fleeing their homes right now, the devastation that's coming from tropical hurricane. So thank you very much.